Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the webinar this evening, where we'll be discussing using EID to drive farm performance. My name is Chloe McKean. I'm the Knowledge Transfer Officer for Beef and Lamb. And tonight we'll hear from Matt Blyth and Ian Wilson. So Ian farms in North Yorkshire and is part of our Challenge Sheep project, which aims to develop best practice for managing replacement ewes and gain a better understanding of the impact of the rearing phase and how that can affect a ewe's lifetime performance. So the project is nearly halfway through, and Ian is one of the 11 farms taking part across the country, collecting weight, BCS, lambing data and lamb performance information. And our second speaker this evening is Matt Blyth. Matt is an independent advisor specialising in data capture, and Matt has been a flock manager in East Sussex and is now the founder of Blyth Livestock Advisory Services. So the plan of action tonight is that Ian will take us through a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll hand over to Matt. We will take questions throughout those, so if you think of a question at any time, then please type it into the box, which usually sits on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can't see this box, you may need to click on the orange arrow to open this box up, and scroll down. You should hopefully see a grey questions box to click the drop down and type your question in. Please also do use this box if you're having any technical problems, and I'll do my best to help. The usual advice is to log out and come back in if you can't hear or see. So just before we get going, I'd just like to kick us off with a poll. So I'd really like to know from our listeners this evening if any of you own any EID and how you purchased it, please. Hopefully you should all be able to see that one. So do you own any EID equipment and how did you purchase it? So yes, fully funded yourself. Yes, purchased with a grant scheme. No, but you intend to buy in the next 12 months, or you're not sure about buying at the moment. Answers are anonymous, and it's just really useful for us to help with upcoming topics for future webinars. So thank you, everyone. I can see there's quite a few votes coming in now. I'll just give it another few seconds. That's brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So we've got quite an even spread. 35% fully yes and bought themselves, 20% with the grant scheme, 25% of our listeners tonight would like to buy in the next 12 months, and 20% not sure at the moment. Thank you. Right then, Ian, I will hand over to you.
Right. Good evening, everybody. It's a bit odd talking to a computer screen rather than a room full of people, but this is the way the modern world is, unfortunately, at the moment. I wasn't quite certain what I was going to talk about tonight, so I thought the best thing to do was just go through what we did at home, how it worked, what we had and why we did it, and hopefully that would answer some of your questions. And if there's any more questions, just type them in as we go along, and I'll hopefully try to answer them as best I can. We're a fairly traditional mixed farm. 600 ewes tupping this year, which is more than we normally have, but that's just the way things have worked out. Lambing starting the 26th of March. The way they've tupped, we're going to be finished by about the 7th of April because we've got 550 lambing in the first fortnight. So we're going to be a bit busy for the Easter weekend. Traditionally, we were sort of Texel and mules, and then we moved into Texel cross mules, and then we're moving further down the sort of Texel cross mule, cross back to a New Zealand type Texel to try and breed all our own replacements. We've bred all our own tups as well for a number of years. With every now and again we buy a new tup in to get a bit of fresh blood. The majority of lambs we try and sell off grass, and they all go on a Tesco contract. We don't have the grass here to finish the lambs all winter and tup at home, so it's imperative that they go quick. So growth rates are very important to us, and also I would rather have a few more singles and get rid of the lambs and have a lot of triplets that hang around until a lot later on in the year. Like was said earlier, they were part of the AHDB Challenge Sheep project, which I'll speak a bit about as we go through. I thought sort of basically I'd say the EID equipment we have on the farm, we have 2 handheld breeders. There's a AgriDent 600, which is a sort of very basic, very handy piece of equipment. You can put a lot of information into it, but you can't recall any data out of it. which although it's very handy to have in the handling system, putting things in, if you want to know things like bloodlines or daily live weight gains, then you need the other handheld reader that we have, which is an AHDB Scion. I know different software companies use the different pieces of equipment in different ways. I know Shearwell use their Scion differently to Border software, and I think that's a little bit down to what company you're using for your software as to how different bits of equipment work for you. Personally, I prefer the AHDB because it's easier to use, the AHDB 600, sorry, because it's easier to use rather than the Scion, but the Scion has a lot more information you get out of it, so it's horses for courses and what you want to do. We have a very basic sort of system. We have a EasyWay 7 based, is attached to a IAE way or a combi clamp. The EasyWay 7's very sort of simple. All it'll actually shows weight, the EID tag, and the daily live weight gain, which is what we're doing is sort of all we need. You can get more complicated weigh heads that'll tell you a lot more information as you're going along. And the other thing that the EasyWay 7 needs is it needs a reader of some sort, so either a stick reader, our AHDB reader, or a panel reader, which we do have, but that's connected to the side of the combi clamp. The panel reader is very good. In fact, it's too good sometimes because it'll pick up sheep from all over the place, so you'll be very, very careful with them. And we've also got a set of weigh cells under our combi clamp, which is useful for some things, but not for all. Why we use EID, as I mentioned earlier, we breed a lot of our own replacements, so we need to know who's related to who for sort of bloodlines and things. And it also gives us a good ability to find out what problems we've got, and we can follow them through to see if it's just a bit of bad luck or whether it is a genetic trend. We have fairly high mastitis levels, which we've looked at for a long time and can never really find anything too genetic. It's just seems to be what we've got in the farm. We've tried a lot of things with hand sanitizers, trying to keep our hands as clean as we can during lambing, and I'm sure this year we could have sold the hand sanitizer for a profit rather than giving it to the sheep. But anyway, fertility is another problem we've had. I'll speak a little bit about that later. Foot problems, we traditionally don't have that bad foot problems. Certain tups do seem to throw worse feet, and there are some things that we're doing about that. And also, there are some that have a lot of problems with conformation, especially shoulders, and we can trace nearly all those problems back to a couple of tups we've bought a few years ago, so gimmers off those tups are no longer kept. The other reason we use it, use EIDs, daily live weight gain, I sort of use this as the most important part of the EID that we use. Basically, it tells you what your flock's doing, or hopefully it's doing. It's an excellent indicator of the flock performance. A good daily live weight gain means your lambs are doing well. The problem with this is that they need to be weighed regularly to actually get an accurate result. We weigh all our sheep, certainly after weaning, weekly, to pull lambs out for slaughter, and before that, maybe every 3 weeks. So if you haven't got time to be doing it regularly, then daily live weight gain possibly isn't the indicator that it is for us. A good daily live weight gain, you hope all is well. A bad daily live weight gain, well, it means you've got a problem, but finding the problem, the EID software can't tell you that, but it's usually worms, minerals, grass quality, usually in and out of milk, or it could be an indicator of disease. We've had a few incidents. One was a mineral deficiency, specifically cobalt, that you could tell was coming by the daily live weight gain. And we had a problem last year with our lambs. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but we could see them stopping growing, and we tried doing everything we could, but we couldn't find a problem. Also, falling daily live weight gain can also indicate a worm burden far before a fetal egg count can. But again, you're never certain whether that falling daily live weight gain is down to the worms, the minerals, the grass quality, or anything else. Although it's a very useful tool, you've got to have your eyes open and know what else is going on around you to see what's going on. This is just an indicator of our daily live weight gains and the weights that we take. This is just over the last 3 years, although we can take it back a bit further. And as you can see, things are fairly consistent throughout the years. 2020 and 2018 seem to be very, very similar, whereas 2019 is a bit of an anomaly because we had a high birth rate because we didn't have any silage, but also we had lower weights, which, as I'm sure you all remember, was down to the drought we had. And that's down to lack of grass. And again, the daily live weight gains tend to show be sort of very, very similar, obviously. But the daily live weight gain this year, I'm a little bit disappointed with, but we've had a very odd year for grass. I know some people across the country have had a lot of rain, some people have had no rain, and we've had spells of rain and spells of drought, which have been a bit difficult to work out what you're going to do with your grass, but that's just the weather, unfortunately. As I mentioned earlier, that 2019, the drop in daily live weight gain from 5 to 8 weeks and 8 weeks to 100 days was purely down to cobalt. And if you had that another sort of 20 days on, they picked up remarkably quickly, so they all got a cobalt shot, which seemed to work tremendously well. When we use EID, all lambs are tagged at 24 hours old, which I fully appreciate isn't manageable for a lot of farms. I'm very lucky that my mum and dad are still very keen to help and quite enjoy tagging sheep, which isn't always the best job in the world when you've got a million other things to do when you're lambing.
Ian, we just had a question on your previous slide.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I just wondered.
No, that way. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so we just had one question come in. What are your target weights, please? I've got your performance there. Is that on target for you, or have you set targets?
We don't set targets because I think each year is different. I would aim for everything to start with a 3 up to 8 weeks, and then 8 weeks to 100 days. I would like it to be higher than 20. I'd like it to be sort of 25, getting up to 30, although that's maybe not quite realistic across the sort of average as a whole flock. We have some sheep obviously doing a lot more than this and some doing a lot less. But I'm happy with it to 8 weeks. This year we've had a slight problem that I think we weaned some of the lambs far too late, which was a clever idea at the time, but it seemed to have backfired. And I think it's also backfired onto body condition score they use as well now, but we'll see that a bit later, and that's something the challenge sheep can look into. So like I said, I'd like it to start with a 3 is my main aim. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, we've just had another question come in on that subject. Do you weigh all of your lambs at birth?
It's a yes, sort of. We weigh a average lamb, and then that's the benchmark, and anything after that, it's a guesstimate. Is it slightly bigger, slightly less?
Yeah.
If you get a really big lamb, they get weighed, but if you get usually it's an average lamb weighs 4 kilos, therefore all average lambs weigh 4 kilos. Yeah. The number of lambs we've got, I can't find a way of actually doing it so that so you can weigh each one individually.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian.
Okay. Like I said, we weigh lambs at birth. Like I said, that was it's a bit of a guesstimate. 5 weeks of age, which is the first OVVAC, 8 weeks, second OVVAC. We may wean in between, depending on what we think the lambs are doing. Everything gets weighed at weaning, and then weekly till sale for the heavier lambs. Some of the light lambs might get put on a different field and not weighed quite so often, but that's how. And then they're used for challenge sheep. Their year weight and body condition scores. They're done pre-lambing, which is on the Heptavac, 8 weeks old, weaning, tupping, housing, which isn't a challenge sheep thing, but we do it, so a bit of idea what condition they are when they come inside, and the scanning. All medicines are recorded on the Scion handheld reader that we had earlier, and all slaughterhouse reports are analysed. Again, with us breeding a lot of our own tups, we can use those to see which tups are producing the best lambs, but the best lambs aren't necessarily the most profitable. Just a bit of a case study here. 2 tups, one's homebred, one's bought in. 3900 is an exceedingly good tup to look at. He's incredibly well shaped, and in my mind, that's a very good Texel tup. The tup on the right isn't, in my eyes, but the next slide shows that in reality, he's a far better tup. So although what you look at with your eyes might tell you one thing, the figures can tell you something completely different. As you can see, scanning percentage, this has to be taken with a slight pinch of salt because 3900 probably got more pure Texel use, so that could explain a little bit too of the lambing percentage and the lambing assistance. But I think you'll agree from these figures there's a vast difference between the two tups. And all the ewes were treated in a very, very similar way. Although interesting, the birth weight's very similar. Once you get to 5 weeks of 5 weeks old, there's nearly 2 kilos of difference all the way through with weight. Days to slaughter's less also. Killing out percentage is slightly less, but it's only 1%. And the carcass price, ironically, is more, which I expect is down to the days to slaughter. The interesting thing as well is that they tend to grow out to be bigger sheep, which is something with 68.2 kilos as a tupping weight as a shearling is all right for us, but we have some ewes to up around the 100 kilos, which are just a bit too big in my eyes for. They need a lot of grass and they need a lot of turning over if they ever have to be tipped over. Again, another tup that I bought, he was a pedigree Texel. He was an exceptional lamb. I bought him a lot cheaper than I was prepared to pay for him. His progeny won all sorts of classes at local shows. I was really, really pleased with him up until the following year, when not a single one of his gimmers had grown above 58, had grown. They had just stopped growing. So from now on, that tup is purely used to produce fat lambs. We've kept a couple of sons off him, and their gimmers, if you keep their gimmers on again, they tend to be very, very similar. So it's just another genetic thing that for some reason that tup doesn't produce your lambs that keep going. But for what he does at the moment, he's doing us a good job of getting lambs to 40 kilos at 90 days, which, like I said, we sell everything off grass, so that's what we want. We've been trying to breed the best gimmers we can, bring a relatively close flock. So 2 years ago, we decided that we were going to choose the best 120 ewes and put those to the best tups we had. We decided that the best thing to do was the heaviest lambs at weaning. They've had to make certain that all those lambs are born as triplets. Obviously, a single lamb has a slight advantage at that. We checked all the ewes to make certain there were no severe breeding problems, such as the prolapses, too many assisted lambings. We've gone with that for the past 2 years, but is weight at weaning the most important fact? I don't know. We have a ewe here. She's 12-year-old. She's had 17 lambs at 2.43 a year. She has lots of lambs, lasts a long time, but this year she wasn't selected because the lambs weren't heavy enough, which I don't know if it's the way to go forward. I would love to set up my own sort of EBV type thing, and it's something I'm looking at and trying to work out how to do, and we collect an awful lot of data, so we can possibly do it, but I'm not certain quite how to get it to work. And will this breed the best ewes? Well, I'll tell you in a few years' time, because as with all things with sheep, you can't find out of 1 year. Picking our gimmers, traditionally, again, it was the heaviest gimmer, simply because it was an indication of good maternal characteristics and a good conversion of forage. I decided a few years ago to have a look to see if it was, or what it was born as, affected lambing percentage. You can see one as a singlet lambs at 1.2%, one as a triplet at 0.74, which is about, we average about 0.8 generally. Triplets lamb at just shy of 2%, and if they're born as a quad, the lamb at 2.5%. So there is some data to show that singles, keeping gimmers that were born as singles isn't a. Can you still hear me? Because I just had a thing come through about slow network connection.
Yes, you went a bit slow, Ian, but we can hear you again now.
Anyway, I'll keep talking. Yeah. Now, so I said the thing on my computer, that's all.
Ian, do you want to turn your camera off? That might help. Apologies, everybody. I think Ian's just frozen on us.
All
Ian, can you hear me? I think we'll have to mute Ian for the minute and see if we can get Ian back. I think what might be best is if we switch over to Matt. Matt, is that okay with you until we can get Ian back?
Yeah, no problem at all. It's one of my fears of doing these things these days.
So I can see you at the moment, right? I can see your screen, Matt. That's brilliant, and I'll just give Ian a ring. Thank you.
You can see my screen, yeah?
Yes, we can. Thanks. Yeah.
No problem. Well, thank you, Chloe, for inviting me today. Yeah, I was a flock manager for 15 years, working in the industry since I left school. And I was part of the KPI project, which AHDB run, looking at collecting data, which got changed into challenge sheep. And I was in the first 2 years of challenge sheep till I went out on my own. So what I'm going to talk about today is a very broad brushstroke of collecting data, both for sheep and beef. But when you first start, it's very puzzling and confusing. There's so much stuff out there. People don't quite know what road to go down. So we're going to try and work our way through it slowly to give you some advice. So the biggest thing is the first step. The first step is very difficult for everybody. You know, we hear Ian's doing a grand job of collecting data for challenge sheep, but everybody sees so much collection being done, they don't know where to start. So first place to start is potentially doing a flock or a herd performance assessment. There's tools on AHDB's website for this, but we should be doing this anyway as part of your farm insurance inspection. So to give us an idea of where to look, a rough idea by how many sheep have been tucked, how many rams we've got, what are we weaning, this, that, to find an area that we can consider looking at more and more to tailor down instead of looking across the whole business to start with. So the first step towards change is awareness. So we've done the review, we've looked at the awareness part we're starting to do. The second step is acceptance. We've got to accept things that may have to be done slightly differently to get our information we want. Like, you know, if we're body condition scoring ewes or we're weighing cattle at the same time we're dosing them, might mean we need to bring a cattle crush there where we've always done it between some hurdles before to worm the cattle. So we need a bit of acceptance on how we're going to do this. To start with, because I'm quite mainly sheep heavy, I've kind of put the two things together to give a broad brushstroke of KPIs, key performance indicators that we might look at across using EID or a bit of paper. It doesn't really matter. We just need to collect some information. To start with, you know, we've got sheep tupping data, how many sheep we tupped, when we're tupping. It's the same with cattle mating. Also, you know, the scanning results of the sheep, numbers scanned, how many lambs have got inside them. It can be done on a batch system or it can be done individually, simply with an EID stick reader that's capable of storing information. Again, but it's the same with cattle PD, and we can record the information exactly the same way. We quite often clostridial vaccine ewes and lambs used before lambing. This is done in cattle as well, so we can use that as a data capture point. Lambing records a lot of people don't want to keep, but I believe some basic paper records of how many lambs you lose is critical. But you know, people might not want to do birth weights. Birth weights and bits and pieces, but that's not a problem. but calving records need to be kept for BCMS. So, you know, there's a chance of recording, we need to record the calf to the cow, so let's get a birth weight. In sheep, we take an 8-week point, which is where the ewe has just gone over her maximum or peak milk production. Well, in cattle, that's between 80, 90 days, maybe 100, depends on your breed of cattle. So it can be a great point to capture the weight of the calves then. Also at weaning, again, we wean at different times. No, one's at 12 weeks, one's at 200 days. But again, it's a great place to get an adjusted or a weight, give us an idea of how well that calf or lamb has done. What we're talking about adjusted weights is we're talking about trying to adjust them back so they're all the same. We all calve over or lamb over a 6-week period, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but we're bringing them all back to the average point. So we can take an average point either the first day of lambing or calving, or the midpoint is normally a great point, and adjust everything back to there. So everything's working on 100 days or 200 days, whatever you're looking at. The next point is sale. Great information comes from capturing data at sale, weighing the animals before they leave or when you're grading them or looking at them, and also the data that comes back. But the other point is, like Ian was saying, he's weighing every time he's handling the sheep, every week or every 2 weeks. If you're handling the sheep or cattle, it is a great opportunity to weigh them. Through my experience, weighing lambs younger is easier than actually trying to weigh them for the first time older. It's easier to turn around a 12 kilo, 20 kilo lamb than it is a 30 kilo lamb that wants to argue with you. All right, so we're going to look at data collection points. And again, we just took a broad brushstroke across the sheep and cow being very similar. So this is purely a sheep year. We've got the mating information, takes us to scanning. At scanning, we can record the scanning numbers, the weight of the ewe, the body condition score, and sometimes the raddle colour that's on them. To give you an idea of if we took quickly, I've had groups of sheep that took really quickly, which gave us a low scanning percentage because the rams took most of them within about a 4-day period of big mobs. Next point is vaccination point. We've got this vaccination point again, pre-lambing, great time to take weights, body condition score, record the treatment, the medical treatment, and also anything else you want to do. It gives you an opportunity, especially with sheep, to draft them into different groups to be able to feed them more accurately at the same point. Lambing and calving data can be all captured around lambing time, used to lambs, birth weights. Again, great ways, like Ian was saying, is to weigh the first few lambs, get your eye in to a certain degree, then start weighing, just guessing the birth weights or estimating the birth weights. We did this as part of the the key performance indicator project between myself and another farm that was in it up in Leicestershire. When we took all the weights, he weighed every single lamb. We took estimated birth weights. We were something like 0.1 of a kilo difference across the whole groups. And we wasn't a lot of difference at that 8-week point as well. So we know that we can, within tolerance, guess the birth weights to a certain point. Then we come to the 6 to 8 week point post-lambing. You know, the first time we're handling the sheep, great time to capture a lambing weight. But again, this is where it comes back to the saying, we've got to have tolerance. There's a lot going on that day. We're potentially first time the sheep have ever been handled. The lambs are being wormed. We've got ewes in the way. We might be putting fly product on, and we're asking to weigh the animals at the same point. It adds another definition to it, and we might need some tolerance, but that's why you might take it to the second time you bring the animals in, not the first time, because you're doing so much to them and stressing them out. You want to do it on the second time you handle them in 2-3 weeks later. You just need to set up and think your way through. Then we go to weaning. Weaning is a great time. We get these lines in the sand of capturing weight, body condition score, again, recording any treatments and anything else we need to. We need to capture culling information to understand why we're getting rid of these animals. And if we can start getting nice definition lists of why we're culling, AHDB have got some for the challenge sheep, and there is others available, but we haven't really as an industry got a good definitions list, so we can start looking at things. And this comes back to your review with your vet or with a consultant, with anybody. You might start picking up, we're getting rid of a lot of ewes that are young. We might start having to look for iceberg diseases or something else that's happening. It is a great opportunity to capture some information. Then body condition scores all the way back round to tupping every time you're handling the sheep. But once the sheep have potentially met their optimum body condition score, do we have to body condition score them as regular? Probably not, but the thinner sheep, to make sure they're moving up and that there's no problems like parasites or anything else going on, they need body condition scoring more often. Then we've got the weight of lambs being sold, predicted grades we can put in, and then we've got the actual stuff. We can look across the whole production year if we want, or we can break it down to any section during the production year you decide you want to look at. So if you decide after you've done your performance review that you're going to look at lambing to 6 weeks after lambing, or with calves that would be between 80 and 90 days, we can just look at that section or this and build it up and add to it. So one of the big things which is easy for people to capture is weight. So here's some of the historical weigh heads that are about that can capture information. All need load bars or a load cell to join to them. And on the other side of the screens, all the modern stuff that's available that people are using now. There is different levels of the thing. The top of the range level, which at the top can capture about 70 to 90% of your records you want. You can see the life data, historical information on the screen, and you can add in new information as you're going along. Multiple fields on a lot of them. Some of the older stuff has got a bit more of a limitation, but the newer stuff, you can have multiple fields open. On the next level down, these are like the intermediate level. They do a lot of what the upper ones do, but they do also do a lot less. So we can see a lot less information on the screen. We can normally only see one piece of extra data, and we normally can just put one piece in. But again, it depends on the model and where you're buying them from. Then the bottom ones basically are just a bit like your spring balance weigh scales, but with Bluetooth capability that can bounce it across to an app or a phone or whatever you're using. But a lot of this data can be just downloaded into Excel. So perhaps to start with, you might just need to buy the hardware and use Excel. You know, I'm not proficient in Excel, I'm self-taught, but within some download these into Excel, the software comes as part of it. You know, you can process some basic information by just using that Excel program. But remember, you still need an EID reader if you're going to collect EIDs. And with cattle having soon, it was supposed to be sooner, but it seems to be moving back with the livestock improvement policy program. Cattle are going EID exactly the same as sheep, so EID readers are needed, or potentially needed. So there's different ranges of these as well. We've got stick readers that just capture the tag number, don't do a lot of anything else, but can be linked to apps to send it to your phone, can be again downloaded into Excel, or can be Bluetooth across to the app. Then we have data loggers, as I call them, things that we can add more information in. We can have a routine on, so we scan the tag, add the weight in, add the body condition score into it. If we're using spring balance weigh scales or none of the modern stuff, lambing routines on some of them, etc. Then, like Ian's using, we've got more data loggers that we use for lambing time. The science, where we can see all the historical information. On some of the stick readers, we can see historical information as well, but it's limited. On the science, because they're a miniature Windows computer, simply, they can be programmed with a software program that we can see all the genetic information, all the history, everything that's basically in the database. Then this is an old Agrident hand reader. Ian's using the more modern ones, but they're still very good for simple things, simple routines built on them, scanning a ewe to the lambs, birth weights, etc. They're very good and handy. All these things can be, again, linked to apps with Google, Apple, into your computer. Most of them can be downloaded into Excel, don't need fancy packages if you don't want. But then you come down to having your panel readers or race readers that they're, but like Ian was saying, they broadcast a bigger field which can be picked up around and about by other animals, etc. But these can be tuned down. Most people don't know this, so the best thing to do is set them up, move the readers around the crate and set up the read range, the read field. You know, the companies you buy them from can quite happily do this. And these can be all linked to your signs, your handhelds, your computers, etc. There is multiple software packages out there. Whoever you like, go with whatever, you're more than welcome. I've just seen I've got Datamart's old logo up there. TrueTest, a bit of a mistake there. So I've done a quick overview of some of the software packages. So because it's AHDB, we're trying to anonymise as much as possible, but we can see farm axes at the end there because it's a completely different beast, and hopefully you'll understand that by the end of this presentation. So to start with, flock books, flock records, they're compulsory stuff we need to keep. Some of the software don't actually record this to keep us within tolerance of government records, which people really don't understand. Some of them are close, but not quite there. Then some of them are not even compatible with EID. Some of them just work on mob systems, which again doesn't help us for a cross compliance. I like a clean, good, crisp distillation list for vetimed treatments as well as diseases, etc. Some of these we can pre-populate. Some of them haven't got an option set for 2 or 3 things, which don't mean a lot. Some of them haven't got it at all. And other ones we have to write it in the notes, which makes it more difficult to get the information out. And this is the same for deaths. More of them seem to like you to write a note in. I'm profoundly dyslexic, and I spell different things different ways every day. You can spell it the different ways between one sheep and another, so it doesn't help for bringing them out on the notes. Some software have KPI capabilities, some kind of do, but it's not to the degree I would like to see, and some of them just, there's nothing there at all. Something that we majorly discovered when we was doing the first KPI project is there is a different way of recording in some of this software. So some of this software is basically just looking at physical, so where the animal is now, what its capabilities are now. But if you sell the animal, that data is then very hard to bring back, or if you move it from management group to management group. So for me to have a real-time physical analytic, so if we have a virtual management group that we're probably doing a treatment with, but then they're spread out among multiple management groups, we can pull that information back. Then historical, you know, we started off with 1,000 ewes at tupping time, or 40 cows. We sold one for being empty. Then we that information still be able to be retrieved. The next thing is cloud. Some of these software store up to a cloud server. Some of them do not, so it's just stored on your computer, which you just have to get into a good routine of backing them up. But it's something to be aware of. Then where most people seem to be these days is with apps. Between Apple and Android, some of these software are not compatible with both, which is, if you go out and buy it and realize you want to put it on an iPhone and it's not compatible, is not the best thing out there.
Matt, we've just got a couple of questions on that slide.
Yep. Back what I want.
Yes, we have had a couple of requests if you could just reveal the names, please. So I think it's just worth saying this isn't all of the software companies. That's right, isn't it, Matt? But if you wouldn't mind. This isn't
all the software companies. These are I would say the major leading ones that most people would know, but we're trying to anonymize them. So one, I don't upset anybody, but 2, AHDB have to be independent. So we really don't want to put the names across the top of it. But as you can see, Farmax is a different boy. It doesn't do farm records. It doesn't do EID. It doesn't do vet med treatments thing. It's just looking at management within the farm. So that's the reason that one's actually labelled there, which I forgot about that.
Matt, the letters you have put there, I imagine for our listeners, they might be able to work them out themselves just to help a few people out.
I'm sure they can. Like I say, they're not hid completely. If you're clever enough, you'll work them out.
Thanks, Matt.
Right, on to the next thing. We got to the bottom of that last slide and talked about apps. We talked about apps, and this is where most people want to be. Apps are great. Phones in your pocket. I sometimes find some of the apps a bit, they're great as long as your fingers are not wet. And they've got a little screen, but that's just one of my things. But what we have to be careful of is when we look at some of these software companies is these are way heads. They are not compatible with every thing. So we've got two software companies up here. We will see with Android they're compatible with more things, the L software, but with Apple, with the iOS stuff, they're only compatible with 2 weighheads. Now, is that an issue? Well, it depends if you've already got the stuff on farm. Do you want to get rid of one of these weighheads that probably spends between £700 and £2,000? Go across to the R company, they've got even less capabilities with Android, but they've got more capabilities with I. But again, remember, all these weighheads can be downloaded into Excel or a CSV file, then be uploaded into these 2 software packages. So if you have got them, they are still usable, but it's just a bit of a difficult way to get that information back into the software. Again, onto stick readers. A lot of the sheep industry have got stick readers, and the cattle, when we come EID, will use more of them for doing records, carving records, etc., to upload. But again, we've got the same issue. There's multiple stick readers out there, but they're not all compatible with Apple and Android. Depends which thing got. So you've got to ask the right questions. If you're looking at software, you must ask the right questions. Now, it might be a simple answer. You just need to buy a £150 tablet to get around the problem. But if you're expecting to use it on your phone, and that's how you want to use it, you must just think it through. Again, put all these into these 2 software companies are downloadable through an Excel CSV format. So it's not that we need to throw it away if we've already bought it. We probably, when we upgrade our phones, need to be thinking of what we need to do. Again, so we're looking at management groups now. So this is a management group from where I used to work in 2014. I like setting targets just to give me a bench point of where I want to be. But you've got to remember, this is an average here. This target is an average. Averages, you've got 1 animal out of 100 at it. You've got 49 above it and 49 below it. But as we can see here, that the management group 2 is behind. So how this information was done, sheep walked into the weigh crate, tag was read, the weigh crate captured the thing, it captured the weight all automatically. I downloaded that into Excel and basically added a couple of extra columns in, because the animals recorded draft to the lamb to the ewe, so they were at different gates on weight range. Added 2 columns in, gave them their predicted birth weight. Either could have been brought off the software, or you could just say every lamb weighed 4 kilos. Did the calculation and gave me their weight, adjusted weight. Then we worked it to how many days they've been alive, either the average of the mob or average of lambing time, or what we did was take it to their true birth weight, which gives you the average daily life weight gain. Counted the number of animals up, then divided it by how many was there to give us the average daily life weight gain. Nothing that's really complicated, and something I could show somebody to do on a computer within 5 minutes and a cup of tea. You can use this as a great way of setting your targets for 8 weeks or for 80, 90 days for cattle. This is a great opportunity to work out what's going on. And we can see that these 2 groups are behind, even though they're mixed animals, the same animals, genetics for the other groups, we can see they're behind. So next year we've got the opportunity of making a physical management decision to try and get them animals back up to where we want, if we want to get them back up. So the questions you start asking yourself, is it a nutritional problem, is it an animal health problem, or is there another reason? Well, we added creep in, and the following year we got them back up to below the target, above the target. These lambs wouldn't have had much creep at all, but it got them back up. But again, we can do the same for cattle. So setting the target for 90 days, saying the calves are, the calves are going to be 140 kilos. Take its birth weight away of 50 kilos. Leaves with me 90, divided by 90 days. These animals should be putting on 1 kilo a day live weight. Each target is for every farm. So that's just rough at the top of my head. But I've got farms doing 130 1.3 kilos a day to 1.4 kilos a day at this point. So it's easily achievable, but you've got to tolerate it to your breed, your conditions. So setting your own targets and trying to beat them is quite a nice achievement. But we can take this to being adjusted live weights and setting your targets for the average for the whole thing. So we got our 8-week target here, so we can see that we're improving. So we can see in 2014 we were at 19.6, then we adjusted things and got things better, and we got to 21. Then we had a massive dip down to 18. And we can see on the graph on the other side that we looking at how many lambs are below our target. Our target was 20 kilos at this point, and we can see that just over 40% in 2014 were below our target. Above our target. Then we got above our target in 2015. We nearly got up to 70% of lambs. Then we had a massive drop again. And again, this relates to small lambs. So lambs below, not below 20 kilos, below 16 kilos. We give ourselves a tolerance for not every lamb's going to make it, but below 16 kilos, what percentage below that? And again, you can see in 2016 we had a problem. We've been monitoring data on this farm where I work for nearly 10 years then, and we can see we had a massive problem. We're going backwards all of a sudden. So what was going wrong? But we need to interpret data and understand more what's going on the farm. That year I broke my Achilles heel on Christmas Eve. That problem, me being off work, still trying to work like all farmers do, but trying to work, even when I had skilled labour trying to help, but things were doing slightly wrong, slightly late. It had a massive effect on the business after lambing and on to the next year. So not just monitoring, but understanding the whole business is quite key to it. Right, another point worth looking at, and this is looking at the live weight wean per sire. This could be cattle, it could be sheep, but this is looking at sheep because we wean well before we buy the next year's sires. So it gives us an opportunity to look at our genetics and what genetics we need to invest in next year. Do we go back to the same supplier? Do we look for another? So again, this is basically using some old-fashioned ways and some modern ways of capturing this information. So putting rams that are very similar into one group, or putting two lots of rams into one group, but we can tell apart Suffolks and Texels. Either scanning their EID tags then, or putting marks in the shoulders so we can follow them through to lambing time. Then capturing that information either with a scanner or that dot and relating it to the lamb by either scanning the lamb to the ewe or carrying the dot system on until we get to lambing time. Then going through the same process on the weigh heads as kind of we did for the 8-week weight, and recording either the dot or the tag and bringing it back to the sire. So we've got a management group that's all got red dots in, count up the weight and divide it by the number of rams, and then to give us a total. Well, Liz Jennifer said years ago when she was at AHDB that each ram should sell 5 tonnes of meat a year. So we've converted this back to being a weaning target in 90 days. It should be 1.8% weaned. I forget what the weaning weight is, but the total weight's there, and it was about 70 ewes. Really, really high target. But the important thing is sire 2 is way behind my other sires. So this again could be done for bulls, looking at cattle. So it could be 200-day weight, 50 cows to the bull. Each calf should be 250 kilos. Times it by 50, it should be 12 tons of meat per bull. But you adjust this to what if you're bulling 40 cows, you adjust it to 40 cows. So, but it gives you a good idea of where we should be investing money in genetics, especially in a sheep flock where we've only got a short production cycle of probably 4 or 5 years on a ewe, and the rams might be 2 or 3 against the cow that's got probably a 10-year production life in it. Right, cost over sheep. Just to give you an idea, a manual weigh crate with load cells costs about 2,500. We got 800 to 2,000 pound on a weigh head. An EID reader costs 750 to 1,200, giving us a 5,700 pound cost. Software ranges between 200 pound and 1,000 pound a year. Plus some training, data analysis, sports, probably between 180 and 1,000 pound a year. Gives us a total of about £9,870 a year. Well, if we divide this, look at an 800 ewe flock selling 1.5%, that's 1,200 lambs a year. Each lamb's valued at £60 a lamb, gives us a grand total of £72,000. Well, if we increase production by 0.7, I don't think this is ridiculous. We can get an extra 56 lambs, and then 56 lambs valued at the same price gives us 75,000, which if we take the 72 away from the 75 gives £3,360, which is £10,000 worth of profit over 3 years. Extra profit we have easily paid for our system. Again, if we look at a 400 ewe flock, people tell me it's not all for a large flock, but remember, we can just buy lower thing, but I've took the same price that we're going to need nearly £10,000. We need to lift it by 10%, an extra 40 lambs, and we've basically got £7,200. We bought the lower readers. We can do it. You know, it's not the costs for the equipment can be easily regained if we use them wisely. Right, but to start with, we need to build this like Lego. Oh, it's not going to apply. There we go. Build it like Lego, your data experience. Catch a block, put block on top of block and build it up gradually so you understand, till you understand the big picture. If we go out and try and capture all the information you want or you believe you want to start with, you give up. So choose one area you'd like to capture and just start with that. What can we look at? Well, stocking rate and location influences feed quality and quantity. We also got, if we keep the feed quality and quantity right, we need to look at how this increases peak lactation and also monitor optimum body condition score during pre-tupping and post-tupping. Health is a critical thing within sheep and beef herds, so we need to keep a massive eye on that and add into your management plan what you're going to capture and where. Genetics are a great way of looking at what's happening on your farm, but set targets, measure them, use KPIs, benchmarking, farm bench to help you understand what's going on. Then there is software out there like Farmax. Farmax makes a virtual farm and you can model ideas and options to try and see what, if we increase our production by 5%, have we got enough dry matter, grass available? If we purchase another holding or look at renting another bit of land, if we stock that, what's that going to do to the business? So there is programs out there to help us. Where can I get some advice from? Well, your vet to start with, your vet to help you set up and look at your results using that flock or herd performance assessment to start with. Then you've got your SQP, your rammer, your merchant that sell most of the hardware. Just be cautious, they're salespeople. They're there to sell your equipment. They've probably never used it, but they're there to help you. You've got software and hardware companies out there, but again, remember, they're salespeople. They're there to sell to you. They don't understand your business. There's other farmers like Ian and all the challenge sheep farm, the strategic farms. They're there using the equipment. Get in touch with them. Ask them what they think to what they're using, how they're using it. There's independent consultants like myself and other consultants that don't specialize in EID capture around the country. They've got clients using it. Talk to them, see what they're using. Then again, you've got people like Chloe from AHDB, Neris, that are seeing farmers capture this information all the time. There are multiple farms when they can be. They know what's possible. They know what people are using, what people like. So go out, do your research. Thank you very much. Hopefully that was a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what's possible.
Thanks very much, Matt. I think we have got Ian back with us now, so I'll just quickly whiz through a few of our resources. So it might be useful for those that haven't got EID yet. If you are just getting started with recording, we do have some sheep and suckler record sheets which you can print from our website to record your basic calving and lambing data. And then a bit more depth, we've got our notebooks, so they're also available to order in hard copy, and you can record extra things like body condition score, daily live weight gain, sales, losses, quite a lot of things with those notebooks as well, so that might be useful. And I also just wanted to highlight our brand new KPI Express tool. So that's available at ahdb.org.uk/tools. So it's a new tool that hopefully will quickly allow you to review your performance figures against KPIs. So you can pop in the data that you've recorded from your flock or herd and it'll hopefully give you an overview, a starting point for how your business is performing. Thanks, Matt. If you just move on. And then just want to highlight our upcoming events. So as some of you will be aware, we've got the Sheep Health and Welfare Conference next Tuesday, and also, which might be of particular interest, we've got a series of webinars with Farmers Weekly on EU exit and discussing the changes to farm support. So before we move on to Ian, Matt, I've just got a couple of questions for you. One's just come in. Is there anything you can add to an existing cattle crush? So they've invested in one only a couple of years ago that isn't handheld. Is there something like a panel that could read the ear tag without you having to use a...
We can retrofit most cattle crushes. We just need to tune the readers down or set the readers up correctly, panel readers. There can be quite often a lot of interference with all the metalwork, white noise, but well set up, yeah, we can do it. It's not an issue. It's just a bit of time and investment. We can set them up. I would never dream of sending one, just dropping one on farm. We need to come out and set it up properly.
Thanks, Matt. And the next one is, I know we appreciate you couldn't reveal the company names on that table. So for farmers listening, what are the key questions really that they should be asking before they purchase?
Make sure it does the records that you're after. So if you want a flock, if you want to do it for sheep, make sure it does all your cross compliance, it's compatible with BCMS. If you're cattle, make sure it does that sort of thing. If you're looking at apps based things, make sure it connects with your phone. Make sure your phone's modern enough that it's capable of it. And Wayheads, just write yourself a list of questions and think what you want out of it, and don't let the salesman tell you what it can do.
Thanks, Matt. We've just had a couple more come in. Could you just explain the adjusted weights again, please?
What we're doing with adjusted weights is we're taking the birth weight off the animal. We are taking its weight at the point we've weighted it and taking that point of how well it's grown between birth and that point, and then I think that's the easiest way to adjust it, just dividing it by the number of days. That sound right, Ian? That sound right, the best way of explaining it to adjust it?
Yeah, I'd sort of say almost an adjusted weight's a projection of what it can be to make certain they're all the same on the same day, if that makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, it's trying to get them to a fixed point. So we're lambing over or calving over a period of 6 weeks. We're trying to get every animal to the same day in reality, I think is probably the thing. So we're taking the birth weight off its weight, taking the point it's grown off and dividing that by the number of days it's been on farm.
It's so you can get a very good comparison of shapes. Like Matt said, if you're lambing over 6 weeks, at weaning, some lambs are 6 weeks younger than others. So it's just getting to a point where you can say, well, actually, adjusted weight is X. Therefore, you can compare everything relatively equally without.
Thanks, both. We just had a comment here as well from one of our listeners that they've been using the phone app for several years and they find it really useful to record straight away once you've treated something or something's died. Yeah. It's instant.
Phone apps are a great way forwards. Yeah, for one-off treatments, I love them. But if you're weighing a group of animals and putting a body condition score in, sometimes I don't want my phone out in the rain.
Final question for you, Matt. Oh, sorry, Ian.
I was going to say, I think although they are getting better, battery life on phones used to be a very big thing with those, whereas I think now they are getting slightly better. If you're doing a lot of sheep, you need a very good phone with a very good battery.
Yeah, and one of my bugbears a few years ago, because I used auto drafters, is if my phone rang, my auto drafter stopped.
We just got a final question for you, Matt, at the moment. Are there load cell wayheads that do cattle and sheep?
Yeah, the wayheads will do both. It doesn't matter what it is. We just need to change the load bars because the cattle crush weighs a lot more than the sheep weigh crate, so we just need different load cells. But all the equipment, the EID readers, the wayheads can be unplugged off one and put onto from cattle to sheep, no problem at all. Crossover without any problems.
Thank you. We've still got plenty of people online, so if it's all right with everyone, Ian, it'd be great to just finish your presentation because you've gone to a lot of effort. Are you ready?
Yeah, 2 seconds.
If anybody is listening and does have to nip off, we do have a feedback form that will pop up when you leave, so it'd be really helpful, please, if you could fill that in when you go. But thanks, Ian. I think we missed everything on the slide due to your sound. If you could.
Yep. Oh no, I'll go back to the in 2 seconds.
Ian, we had a question in whilst you're flicking through. Actually, how many ewes do you normally put to a tup?
It varies greatly. Usually we're about 1 to 60 for some, down to 1 to 30 for others. That's mainly down to field size. We could run bigger mobs and change and to move them fields easier, but because we've got a lot of our own bloodlines, it's easy to split them up into small. It's easier to tuck them in smaller groups, and then you can keep your bloodlines a bit further apart. The better ewes we're putting into, like I said, mobs are 1 to 60 at the moment. Some of the smaller, some of the Texels, pure Texels, are running at 1 to 30 purely because that's all they can go with due to the fathers and things. Everything this year is tucked incredibly quickly. I've got no problems at all running 1 to 60. I wouldn't mind pushing further, but we don't really have the field size to do it, which is why we do what we do. If that makes sense. Right. Sorry about Luke.
Ian, do you want to just turn the camera off? Because I'm a bit worried about the network again. I've just had a notification.
That one. That off? Right. Okay, that one. Right. Sorry about disappearing before. Right. What I was saying is we select gimmers by the heaviest gimmers that were born. We also make certain that they are born as twins because, as the table on the right shows, the lambing percentage varies greatly depending on what they were born as. Although I appreciated this figure probably existed, I didn't realise it was quite as severe as it was. Our lambing percentage usually about 185, so we've need to get as high as possible. We did have a dip a few years ago, and that was partly down to keeping a lot of single Texel ewes, which genetically didn't have it in them to produce a lot of lambs. And one thing I will say, this afternoon I was sat in the office just having a quick run through this, and I looked something up, and I found a ewe that had lambed 5 times. She's had 13 lambs. We have lambed her 5 times, and she's only ever had 7 lambs get beyond 6 weeks old. So although we can have all the data in the world that we keep looking at, every now and again we miss one, and she's been took this year, but she certainly won't be took next year. Come on, next slide. Next slide. Just to follow on from what Matt said really about body condition scoring, we use it to see trends obviously in the ewes and how they're doing. Some ewes we found have tremendously variable body condition scores. They can go from a 5 down to a 2, back up to a 5 again. So although it looks like a very severe drop, we know the ewes, the software allows us to know which ewes are doing it. So it also means that we can have a bit more relaxed approach to those as we expect them to come up again, whereas some sheep, if they've had that savage a drop, don't recover. Body condition score and scanning results are all used to split sheep up for feeding nearest lambing time. The good thing about this is that everything gets scanned everything gets body condition scored around scanning. I'll scan everything as it comes through the scanning crate and record their scanning percentages then. And then from then on, we can split everything up in the office into lots of feeding. So it means that there's very little handling of sheep. In the past, when we didn't have the EID software, we'd spend days running sheep round and round the handling system trying to get them into the right groups. And at least with this, we can do it in the office beforehand. There's obviously a few ones that buck the trend that have lost condition that you have to keep an eye on, and they'll get changed as we go. But like I said, the majority of it's done beforehand, so it's very, very stress-free for the sheep. And just a few key points. Matt's covered some of these as well. It can be very time-consuming. are collecting all the data. There's no point collecting it if you're not going to use it. And like Matt said, you've got to select what you want, collect that data, and then move on from there as you go. You can collect all sorts of data that you want, and you end up with a spreadsheet that's huge, and you look at it and you're completely lost. Like Matt said, you don't need software, all data can be put into Excel. EID is not going to solve all your problems. It'll probably create more because you'll find more things that you want to work on. It's a very, very good tool, but it can't do a job of a good farmer. You've got to know what you're doing first. The other thing with EID is you always look for the negatives. Well, it also shows the positives for it, and farmers are very good at looking at the negative and saying, well, my daily live weight gain isn't good enough, and this isn't good enough, and body condition score's too low. Well, you look for positives as well. You can compare different mobs, like Matt said, so you can see the ones that are doing well and learn from it and go on from there. The other important thing that Matt touched on is benchmarking into your own data. Be very careful with the facts and figures. You've got to compare your own farm and your own system. You can maybe, if there's other farmers along the road on a very similar system, you can use their facts and figures, but just be careful it isn't 10 o'clock in the pub and they're claiming a 200% alarming percentage, because we all know it might not be true. And the other thing is, you've got to use your eyes all the time. Although the data might tell you one thing, it isn't. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So just keep your eyes open and make sure that the data is actually telling you what you want it to, and not something that you don't expect it to, that could possibly be wrong and push you in the wrong direction. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. Apologies to those that did have sound issues earlier, but it's great that we managed to get you back. We have just got a couple of questions for you, Ian, that have come in. What is your hog tupping weight, please?
What's a what, sorry?
The tupping weight for your hogs, please.
We don't tup hogs.
Oh,
Keep it on the shearlings.
Do you have what you're aiming for with your shearlings, Ian?
Pardon, what was that, sorry?
What are you aiming for with your shearlings, Ian?
What weight?
For tupping, yeah.
About 68 to 70 kilos, possibly a bit lighter. Like I say, we grow yows on fairly well. They're not pushed as shearlings, so they do grow on, and they can get up to around the 80, 90 kilos, which is something I'm trying to get it down to, but 68, 70 kilos as a shearling, lambing.
Yeah. And Ian, you're recording a lot of data. How often do you sit down and review it all? Do you have sort of set points throughout the year?
That's really my dad's job. He spends ages in the office sat playing with figures, and he'll come to me one day, you'll never guess what I've just found, and then we'll sort of look at things. But like I said, daily live weight gain, body condition score are the main ones. We look at those fairly frequently, and then coming up to tupping, we'll have a look and see what's happened and what we can do. A lot of that data comes into around weaning time, and you can use weaning. Culling all the way through the year, we're monitoring that to find why we're losing yows. Usually all our yows get post-mortemed, all our dead ewes, so that gives us a very in-depth amount of knowledge there. So like I say, you just do it as you go, but we'll probably sit down and have a good look at everything around October time to work out what went right the previous year, what went wrong, and how we can improve it for the coming year.
Thanks, Ian. And we've got a question here. Do you creep feed your lambs, and have you monitored growth rates with and without creep feed? Is it cost effective?
We used to. We don't anymore. It was costing us. It was costing us about, off the top of my head, it was about £4 a lamb to do it, and the growth rate was not that much better in reality. We've grown a lot more red clover this year for the sheep to graze, which hopefully is going to do the job of the creep feed. Whether that works or not, the deciding fact last year was that we had 3 mobs come through. One was on creep feed, one was an old rig and fur lay, and one was a brand new grass lay. And a brand new grass lay, I think, was doing 0.43 at 5 weeks. The old rig and fur was doing 0.38, and the creep feeded lambs are doing 0.39. So I thought for the cost of that, it wasn't worth it. However, when we did creep feed, the body condition score they use was much better at weaning. So although it might not be worth it for the lambs, it is possible to look at it for the ewes as a whole.
Thanks, Ian. And do you weigh your lambs at the same time each time you're weighing, at the same time of day? So this person's found that it can vary by a few kilos depending on the time of day that they're weighing.
Yes, it certainly can. We try to, although it's not always possible. We obviously try and make certain they're dry, because that can make a big difference as well. When they're in, if they're inside on crate feed, I don't think it makes that much difference, but certainly if they're outside, you can, and how long they've been in the yards as well. If you're doing a big mob, it's surprising how much difference the first ones and the last ones can weigh just because they've been stood around for so long off grass. But yes, I fully agree that you can make a big difference. The other thing I will say is if you're weighing on a combi clamp, just be very careful of what you've got hung on it, because things like wormers, if you can start off with 2.5 kilos of wormer in your bottle, and as you're worming, it's obviously going down with each time, and that can obviously have a great effect on your lambs.
Thanks, Ian. We've got a couple of questions left from Matt, if you're there, Matt.
Yeah.
Can you use the apps without an EID reader? So could you use an app?
Yeah, you can use an app without an EID reader. You just tap, well, like I've done many times, you catch a sheep or you're doing something out in the field with a cow, you just tap in the last 5 digits of the tag number and it will give you a choice of animals that could be, and you select that animal.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, we can use them with or without.
Thanks, Matt. And when is EID going to be compulsory for cattle?
We're not sure yet. It's back for review, but it's definitely coming. It was supposed to be in here first week of January, but it's been put back. We're not sure where. One of the big reasons is for traceability, but also because of BCMS is the software platform BCMS is on is so outdated. I think it's got more band-aids holding it together than anything else. So LIP's got to replace it. So at that time they decided it was going to be the efficient point to put EID in place. So I'd imagine within 12 months, but we're still not 100% sure.
Thanks, Matt. We've got a question here. Is an Excel spreadsheet sufficient for data analysis? They have EID equipment, but they need to work out what to do with all the data. They're currently looking at 8-week weights, daily live weight gain. Any tips on the next step?
Yeah, I got to say, well, most of the analysis done for challenge sheep is pulled out of the software packages and run through Excel. So, and a lot of the software packages are using Excel underneath it. So, some good experience with Excel. Yeah, you can monitor whatever you like. What was the next step? What was the points they were looking at? Weights at when, Chloe?
8-week weights and daily live weight gains. Any tips on next steps or other things to look at?
Well, the big next step on a sheep flock is your weaning weights and then monitoring your body condition score. We know body condition score has a big impact on the next year's crop, and it's a lot earlier than whatever we anticipated. We're starting to see effects around the 8-week point. So 8 weeks post lambing, we're starting to see effects on the next year's crop, even though the ewes get back to the body condition score. By tupping, the effects are carried on. So one of my big next steps for a client like that would be monitoring their body condition score.
Thanks, Matt. And is linking to the ARAM system complex?
Depends which software you've got, but talk to your software companies. They'll set it all up for you. Yeah, it's not difficult, but it depends what software package you're running.
Thanks, Matt. Ian, are you still with us?
Yeah, still here.
We just got a question here. They were wondering when you look to have your lambs weighing over the 40 kilo mark.
100 days roughly. 90 to 100 days.
Thank you.
So around weaning then, Ian?
Yeah. Like I say, everything's most lambs we want to weigh off grass, so we want to be selling around weaning as much as we can, and then through August, and then certainly finish by tupping, or finish the majority of them. So,
Thanks both. We've had a final question just about the Challenge Sheep project. So we do have a web page on Challenge Sheep on the AHDB website. The easiest way at the moment is probably to type in Challenge Sheep HDB into Google, and that will come up for you. So we've got the case studies of all of our farmers involved and the updates from the individual farmers so far. And we've just had another question just squeeze in, Ian. Have you bought TUPs using EBV indexes in the past? And are there any particular figures you look for? And that'll be our last one tonight.
no, sort of. I don't particularly trust EBVs comparing them off different farms. I certainly trust them comparing from TUPs from the same farm, but I think there's too big a variation, as the one I look for most is daily live weight gain, and that can certainly be an indicator of how good the creek feeder was on some farms, certainly not all. But you've got to know, in my opinion, you've got to know who you're buying off and know what you're doing. And the person who we bought the last few TUPs off is on an EBV type system, and we did use them, yes.
Thanks, Ian. Well, we have reached the end of the questions tonight. So thanks both Ian and Matt for your time this evening. And thank you for running over slightly and allowing for those technical problems. We've had lots of questions come in last minute, so really appreciate your time. And thanks to everyone for listening at home. So the presentation has been recorded along with these questions, and it will be available on the Beef and Lamb YouTube channel. So thanks again, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.